First of all, I'd like to thank you, Mary Catherine, and the Business Alliance for having us here. It's a huge pleasure to see old friends and make new friends. I'll address the question, but if I may just offer a general message, a message of friendship, from Canada to Wyoming, a message that we really have been and want to continue to be your partner in addressing what in fact in many ways are shared challenges, shared opportunities. And so that's true in many areas. It's true in trade, it's true in energy, it's true in social development, many other areas. It's also true in the matter we're discussing today, which is our economic development, rural development, and economic diversification. So to get to your question, Mary Catherine, I think there's certainly a lot of commonalities between the Canadian experience and the what I've heard even today, and reading some of the documents that have come out of the Endow Commission. There's a lot of similarities between the Canadian experience and the Wyoming experience, and I'd like to offer some perspectives. Maybe that's helpful. I think what we can note is we have some challenges. There are pockets of Canada, some areas which are really hot right now. There are some really hot corridors or areas around major cities like Vancouver, like Toronto, I think Calgary in Alberta, and you have Montreal, you have around Toronto there's a whole corridor with high-tech industry in Waterloo and so on. So there are some really hotbeds of innovation and so on and so forth, and you're building on existing strengths, and they were big before and they're getting bigger, and that's great. But there are some other communities that weren't so big and are struggling. There are rural communities. We have some Atlantic provinces that have in many ways depended on fisheries and other traditional industries for a long time, and you see some of these more remote communities further from the centers, they're getting hollowed out a little bit in respect to the young people sometimes leaving to go to college or university elsewhere and then staying elsewhere. So I listened to that this morning in some of the remarks, and it rings true to the Canadian reality in many areas. I think we have slow economic growth and some of the population centers that are aging because the young people are vacating some of their more remote communities. We have some communities where there's low levels of business research and development and difficulty in retaining young people, but also attracting new people. And so, again, shared realities in many ways with what I think I've heard from the Wyoming experience. And what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that we can be partners in addressing those things. And I go back, and I'll go back, my apologies in advance, but my mantra in my job is, we built this continent together, Canadians and Americans. We did. And we defended together, the NORAD, for example, and we will face whatever issues together. So in respect to the matter at hand that we're discussing, there are some experiences that we've had in Canada that possibly can be helpful. I wouldn't say we've got it all figured out. In no way am I saying that. Absolutely not. It's a work in progress. But some of the things we've tried to do that have worked, and I'm happy to share some of these examples. I think the first lesson is focus and leverage the natural advantages or the core competitive advantage of a region. So we have, for example, a city called Rimouski in Quebec, and traditionally was a center of expertise fisheries or traditional fishing industry that was established. They were able to focus on what they do best and translate that into, spin out in a way into new industries like marine industries. And so they leveraged what they had already that was good, and they did that. We have a city in Oshawa, for example, that is near Toronto, and they suffered greatly from the decline in car manufacturing. They were essentially a big major plant for General Motors, but they were close to universities. They had low utility costs, and they had great infrastructure. They leveraged that and now have diversified into other sectors, advanced manufacturing, IT, other sectors that have become successful for them, and they're attracting young people now, and they're keeping them, and they're also attracting immigrants. Immigrants, in Canada, it's an economic necessity. We need immigration, otherwise our population goes down. And we need them to continue to grow economically. They bring talent, and many of our communities' success depends on that. So these are just examples of the types of things we've done, but focusing, leveraging natural advantages, going in for the long game, because none of these things we're talking about happen overnight. You know that very well. You need to be in there for the long game. Be prepared for fluctuation, success, the ebb and flow of success and failure, but with a strategic plan, and you're doing it. This endowed commission that you have is fantastic. We want to be your partner in addressing and supporting the planning process, but certainly partnering where it makes sense to help achieve these objectives. And I think we can do that because we're partners. So thank you very much. I'll stop here.
My next question is for Gitane, and in particular, what opportunities exist for women to excel as entrepreneurs in today's global economy, and what advice can you offer to Wyoming residents based on your broad experience working to advance leadership and economic empowerment for women?
Well, good morning, and thank you for the question, for the opportunity to be here. Also, thank you for your wonderful Blue Jean hospitality. As a proud Albertan, it's nice to feel at home here in Wyoming, so thank you so much for including me today. I'll maybe start with the advice part of the question and work my way back. So I would start by saying that previous panelist, Brittany, her comment that she was told that she couldn't pursue her dream and start her company because she was a woman is not a unique experience. And I think the first thing we have to do is call bullshit on that. That regardless of the state of your economy, developed or developing, whether you're looking to diversify, regardless of what it is, you will never succeed if 50% of your population is not fully engaged. And so we need to ensure that the full range of economic opportunities are available to everybody. Men, women, does not matter. So the first thing we need to do is to acknowledge that, and that requires advocates at all levels. So whatever your position is in the community, you have the opportunity to advocate. Women need mentors as they move through this process. And while it's very important, people are much more likely to pursue an opportunity, a career path, if they see someone that looks like them who has done it already. It is also important for women to have male mentors in this process, people that will help them through, people that they can talk to, people they can bounce ideas off of so that they can learn from those who went before them and hopefully prevent some of the mistakes and really maximize their opportunities. Another thing that's really key would be access to capital. There's all kinds of studies out there about how women and men address risk. Men will put their hand up for promotion when they're about 60% ready. Women wait till they're at least 80% ready, and this translates into when women business owners go to seek a loan. Oftentimes, men will go into their business plan, ask for the money, get the money. Women may go to the bank a couple of times as part of doing their research to make sure they're fully prepared with their business plan before they actually ask for the money, and that can often work against them because they're seen this first couple of times as not being prepared, but the women aren't actually there to ask for the money, they're just doing their research. So, we've seen some success in targeted capital programs for women where they can go, as opposed to leading. Women tend to lean more heavily on their personal savings when starting a business and going out and asking for money. So that's something that's also important. And education is key. I think it's crucial, back to letting people know that the full range of opportunities is open to them. We need to get entrepreneurship curriculum into schools and into extracurricular activities starting from a young age. So rolling it into Girl Scouts or 4-H or wherever it is that you've got young people involved in, that's definitely something that I think would be key to teach them that entrepreneurship is a real career opportunity and you can be highly successful at it. I think in terms of the opportunities available to women in Wyoming, I think in fact they're endless, right? You've got a tremendous resource here in terms of natural resources and human resources, so I think it's really whatever it is that you want to pursue, building off those defenses, building off their strengths, whether it's in energy, whether it's in agriculture. But I would also encourage, as the previous speaker said, you got to pursue your dreams. So whatever it is, with the wonder of the internet now, you see people that are having quite successful businesses from remote and rural communities on sites like Gitane and things, where they make, wonderfully tacky Elvis pillow covers that you never knew you needed, and they ship them all over the world. So I think that really whatever it is, I don't think there's anything that you can or cannot do based on your geography.
Thank you so much. So, Shawn, what is Wyoming's competitive advantage for developing what we already have in terms of our resources, our capital, our products and services, in order to build relationships with international partners and lure new investment?
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. There are a number of attributes that Wyoming has to position ourselves, our economy, to be stronger in terms of international trade and investment and relations. I would say one of the first attributes is that we already are a world leader in energy production and balancing environmental concerns through innovation, through technology, through working with a number of different stakeholders. And that position as a world leader gives us something to share with other countries, but also things for us to be able to learn from. I believe that because we have been such a world leader in energy, we can also position ourselves to be world leaders in other industrial sectors. Recently was in Taiwan a month ago, actually. And it was very interesting to me in Taiwan. Of course, the topic of energy came up, but so too did agriculture. And they view agriculture in terms of calories, and they see agriculture as a form of energy. It was almost not much of a distinction between energy as we think about it and agriculture. So we have a lot to offer the world. So I'd say that's the first attribute. The second attribute, I believe, is that relationships matter. If you think about all of the people in this room who know each other, who have worked with each other, who may not have always seen eye to eye with one another, but you still know that you need to work with this person, it's important. It's important for Wyoming that we have such incredible access to the governor, to the legislature, to agency heads, to the university. Translating that value of relationships to an international stage is incredibly important, because relationships take time to develop. Trade doesn't happen overnight. It requires us to continue to build the conversation, build the understanding. And that is something that Wyoming we're really good at. And then I'd say the third piece of this is that looking at our economy, we have a hunger for diversifying our market opportunities, a hunger to diversify our business models, looking for opportunities to diversify investment in projects here in Wyoming and turn innovation into commercial activity. So I think that gives us a competitive edge, coupled with our focus on relationships and the position that we've had as a world leader in many areas.
Thank you very much, Shawn. So I have a couple of questions for the panel, and feel free to answer individually, or a couple of you reach out. The first question is, which sectors or industries in Wyoming offer the most potential for development, growth, and ownership in terms of increased international trade?
I'd be happy to take the first stab at that, maybe provide a little context in terms of Wyoming's exports internationally. Our annual exports are a little bit more than $1.2 billion a year, and that represents about 3.5% of our GDP. And I'd say that's a lower percentage than our peer states or the US as a whole. The US, I believe, its GDP is represented by about 12.5% exports. Our exports currently are predominantly in the category of chemicals, and for us that is better known as soda ash. Nearly, Fred's given a hand bump. 80% or so of our export activities are in that one category. So we have a lot of work to do to diversify the sectors that we export. There are some other great things happening though. Certainly minerals is one of the higher percentage categories for Wyoming, but so is heavy equipment manufacturing. I also believe that we have more room for growth in terms of exporting innovation, ideas, and services. Wyoming's economy, it's primarily focused on goods-producing sectors, which is counter to the rest of the nation. The rest of the nation is really growing in terms of service-producing industries. The position that we have as a world leader in balancing energy and the environment gives us a lot of institutional knowledge in providing services related to environmental technologies, wildlife, as well as how we can be better stewards of the mineral base, how we can add value. So there's a lot of room for growth there. I would also say I believe that agriculture has some incredible opportunities. Right now, I believe that agriculture represents only maybe 2.5% of our exports to Canada, much less on the international front. We have been, at the Business Council, working and trying to grow new markets for Wyoming agricultural producers or food producers. It takes time, again, to develop those relationships. It takes some training from businesses to understand regulations, international regulations, packaging, consumer preferences abroad. So we are applying a lot of resources to that right now so that we can grow agriculture as a greater sector. But I think that there's a lot that we can offer in terms of energy and environment, technologies, ideas, services, and the benefits there are, there's many multiplier effects. I think this crosses over into cultural exchanges and academic exchanges with students. And we've seen that already with the partnership, for example, that WRI has with Meg Energy in Alberta. Where not only are we sharing technology, but we're also sharing students. Thank you.
So that completely makes sense. I think these certainly are sectors where Wyoming is really strong, and I think there's huge potential. Agriculture, if we look back at the notion of a 20-year time frame, I think the start really would be, I think the task really is to do two things almost in parallel. Start investing in innovation and build up the infrastructure for innovation. Work with the University of Wyoming and the community colleges and really leverage those institutions to really, promote and do research and encourage the spinning out of new technologies, whether there is in those sectors or maybe some transformational advanced manufacturing, for example, which I know is a strength at the University of Wyoming. So I think that's one track, is encourage innovation, and you play the long game there, where you will get early benefits, but the full benefits will play out over time. And then on the other track, in parallel, work with established sectors and try to grow, probably incrementally, the exports and the trade in those sectors like agriculture, energy, and so on and so forth. Energy could mean renewables as well. It could be that you continue to leverage your strong existing natural resources in coal, and maybe there's a technology angle to that with carbon capture and reuse and recycling and storage. So, but you work with these sectors that are already big, and you look for ways to leverage those into increased trade and exports. And again, we're happy, in fact, very willing to be your partners in helping that process so that we can introduce your goods and services to Canada in a way that grows the trade between our businesses. I would just point out that Canada is Wyoming's largest trading partner already in goods and services bilaterally, and I think we can, with some collaboration, we could take that even further. So I would just offer those points.
If I could just add to that, so Alberta is Wyoming's largest trade partner in Canada, and it's a very mutually beneficial relationship. About 10% of all of Wyoming's exports come to Alberta, and we in return send you a lot of oil, by and large, which I think is very mutually beneficial. There's a lot of companies here in Wyoming that supply the Alberta oil sands. For those who may not know, Canada is home to the third largest proven oil reserves in the world. Most of that is in my home province of Alberta. We've had the example that Shawn provided of the partnership with Mega Energy here and some of the great work that's happening there. We also have companies like Encana and Suncor and TransAlta. And I just think, now is the moment to remind people that NAFTA does matter. If you want to continue to trade, you need strong trade agreements that are mutually beneficial to all parties. And for those of you who agree with that sentiment, we encourage you now to speak up and take action, as there's a fair degree of uncertainty around that. And I think the time has really come to speak out in favor of that. Tied to the trade piece, of course, is the post-secondary connection. So we have a great partnership here between the University of Wyoming and the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, which is a polytechnic located in Calgary, where state graduates are able to receive transfer credits towards UW's Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering and UW's Bachelor of Science in Petroleum Engineering, which I think is great. It helps to further foster that cross-border innovation and partnership and collaboration, which again just really goes to create jobs on both sides of the border. There's about 2,900 jobs here in the state of Wyoming that are directly dependent on trade with Alberta, and we would love to help you too.
So my colleague Gitane, my friend Gitane, mentioned NAFTA, and it would be malpractice if I didn't say a word on NAFTA. All the benefits we're talking about of trade, the jobs that it creates, the wealth and prosperity it creates, those things have happened under NAFTA. Right now, NAFTA is about 23, 24 years old, and under NAFTA, trade between the three partner countries has tripled. That's created untold numbers of jobs. In respect to Canada, I mentioned that Canada is the largest trading partner for Wyoming, and that supports, let me get my number right, 13,000 jobs, over 13,000 jobs in Wyoming. So trade and investment with Canada supports jobs here. There is several Canadian companies that are active here. They directly employ 800 people, but there's thousands more, up to 13,000, that are supported by trade and investment. These are your companies selling to Canada, partnering with Canadian companies, having integrated supply chains, and that creates jobs, it creates prosperity. It also, and I think it's important to flag, it also creates choice for the consumer. And so this morning we were talking about the citizen, the consumer, and the importance of the freedom of folks, and that's true in Canada as well. I would point out that free trade introduces more choice to the consumer, so he or she can make the best and the most affordable decisions on quality products. But I would say we've done those things under NAFTA, but NAFTA right now, make no mistake, is possibly in jeopardy. And it's one of those things that I think we've taken for granted because it worked so well, it wasn't in the news much. But right now, we're in the process of renegotiating the agreement. We're heading into the 5th negotiating round. There are things that have been proposals that have been put on the table, frankly, by the American administration that have been very difficult, very challenging for Canada and possibly Mexico. I won't speak for Mexico, but for Canada, these are things that, in our view, would go back on the gains we've achieved in the past and erect essentially barriers to the freedom of our businesses to create prosperity and offer the best products at the best price. Going back on the gains we've achieved is not, in our view, the way to go. Canada will absolutely stay at the negotiating table, but we want a good deal, not just any deal. And to echo what Gitane was saying, it's really important. If you believe that NAFTA has been good, and it's created wealth and opportunities for your businesses and the people to have good paying jobs, because trade jobs pay more and are more rewarding often than non-trade related jobs. If you believe that, this is a time to speak up to your elected officials and other folks. It's really important. This is the time. Thank you.
Thank you all for your very thoughtful responses. I'd now like to open up the floor for audience questions. We have just a few minutes. I think there will be some microphones going around, so please don't be shy.
And while you prepare your questions, we're going to show a video.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you again for all the comments on how we can improve businesses in Wyoming. If I hear correctly, like the Consul General pointed out, that the growth in Canada is mostly centered around these big population centers: Calgary, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and so forth. So like when you think about Wyoming, maybe Shawn can answer that, but think about Wyoming and how do we plan on attracting more population from outside, the human population that can trigger all that growth, thinking about innovation and so forth. How do we have that? So maybe should we build infrastructure first to attract maybe these big population centers? Because think about the people coming in to work, they bring in the families. So we have a support system for families to survive so that they can stay for longer to contribute towards one another.
Well, thank you for that question. I guess I'd start off by saying I don't know that our population is necessarily a barrier to being able to grow our international trade and relations. You pointed out a number of large population centers in Canada, but it's also incredibly exciting to be able to go to a small town like Fort McMurray, which to me feels a lot like Gillette, and see L&H heavy equipment, or see containers created by High Country Fabrication here in Casper, or to go to a trade show with a company like Gluten Free Oats and to be able to help them open up new markets in a number of different locations. But more to your question about what do we need to do here in Wyoming, I guess I would say one limiting factor, and it is a big one, and it is a limiting factor for companies that want to grow a new market base, attract new customers, and that is air service. I believe that we can take advantage of our low population and use technologies to be able to be better connected, but we also need to have that physical connection or access from the outside to the state of Wyoming. So Mike Wandler, who's on my board of directors with the Business Council, who is president of LNH Industry, he will be the first to talk to you about the challenges that he has in bringing customers to his operations in Gillette and Sheridan. These are international customers. He's doing business in not only Canada, but also India, Mexico, Chile. His customers need to see his operations to be able to grow those business transactions. So I'd say that is one of the keys, is air service. I think also we can do more, and we are doing more to help Wyoming companies be export ready. It is not a business skill an entrepreneur is born with. The dynamics change from market to market. So we are doing more than we have ever with the Business Council in working with our Business Resource Network partners in helping companies become more ready for exporting activity, understanding those markets, and all that goes into doing business abroad.
If I could just add to that with some of the Alberta experience. So Alberta is very similar to Wyoming in a lot of ways. We have a lot of natural resources. We're a relatively small population along a large land base, so we're about 4 million people in a province roughly the same size as the state of Texas, sitting on the third largest proven oil reserves in the world. So, you know, we've got a lot going on. But we've used our space to our advantage, and that's one thing I think that Wyoming can do. We've been successful in attracting things, so unmanned aerial vehicles, for example. We have the first beyond visual line of sight testing ground in Alberta for that technology because of our vast open spaces and our big sky. So, you know, I think those are things you can market. We're also seeing some success in marketing our quality of life, which I know is a value you also share here in Wyoming. So we've had some success in attracting advanced industries, high-tech industries to Alberta because people are looking for, as the governor said earlier this morning, people want to live and they want to live well. And I think that's something where you have a lot going for you. We too have seen success. We're doing a lot of work in supporting Alberta companies to learn how to export, and that's everything from explaining a trade agreement, you know, what would it be like to do business with a country like Korea or the United States. You know, we often say to people, do you export? And they say, no, but I sell to Montana or Wyoming or Idaho, so then you're exporting. But helping them to grow that as well as everything from explaining the mechanics of it to also assisting them at trade shows and other things. I think there's a whole suite of things that it sounds like you're doing, but I'd be happy if people are interested in more specific details of the Alberta experience, please let me know.
Thank you for that. I think we have time for one more quick question, and I think the lady in the back had her hand raised. If someone could bring her a microphone, please. All the way in the back.
Is that okay? Okay, so it's just a very quick comment if I make to the panel, focused towards your comments earlier on, Gitane, about entrepreneurship in schools. My name is Emma Jane Alexander, and I manage the Shell 3D Visualization Centre based in the School of Energy Resources at UW. And a few weeks ago, we had a visit in from the Women's Society of Engineers, and they brought with them a group of schoolgirls aged between 8 and 12 on a Saturday morning to experience engineering activities at the university. And I had a girl of about 8 years old standing inside of our $1.8 million 3D cave talking about the data she was looking at, which was subsurface data of Wyoming. And we got talking and I said to the girl, so do you do any coding or do you play any video games? And she says, yeah, kind of, I play Minecraft. And I said, that's great. And she says to me, I build houses and I sell them to my friends and my family. And I thought, okay, that's pretty good, but I need to play this cool. I want to keep her engaged. So I said, oh, that's great, that's really good. And I said, well, did you know that if you program in Python, you could build houses really quickly, bigger houses, and more of them in Minecraft? And she said, oh, no, I didn't know that. And she thought about it, and then she said to me, so does that mean I can build more of them and bigger ones? I'd have more to sell to my family and friends. And I said, yeah. And that's how the conversation went. And I think the idea of being able to not just teach but encourage entrepreneurship in schools is a really strong, powerful idea that it'd be wonderful if we can find a way to do something with it. Thank you.
No, thank you for your comment. That's something Alberta's doing a big rewrite of its curriculum, and one of the things we're looking at, we have the highest rate of entrepreneurship in all of Canada, in Alberta, the highest per capita investment. We've got a lot going for us, but we still think we could do more, and so we're trying to get curriculum in the elementary schools, starting from, about 5th or 6th grade, where kids would start to learn about entrepreneurship and develop those competencies that they would then carry through their educational career and hopefully into their professional career. So thank you for that comment. It's a great story.
All right, at this point, I think we are about ready for lunch. And so I just want to thank the panel once again for sharing their expertise and ideas.
Thank you, Shawn, Reese, for the work that you've done, the excellent work with the Wyoming Business Council.